All right, college athletics is going through massive change, or reformation, if you will. And one of the guys that is covering this as well as anybody is Scott Dochterman from The Athletic, covers Iowa and national college football and college basketball at large. Scott, thanks for joining us, man. I know you're out in California trying to get a hold on everything that's kind of going on. So what has this been like to cover, if you zoom out, like all this change happening, it feels like at once in college athletics?
It's incredible. I mean, because this is, we all recruit it at a micro level so often, like what this recruit means for this team and this year. And a lot of times it's a 3-star from Central Illinois or Eastern Iowa or whatever. But this is like the biggest macro development we've ever seen in the history of sports and college sports, because now athletics departments can pay their athletes. It takes collectives basically in-house. They have, not this year, but the next year, they can actually pay their athletes. Now, there are a lot of questions that I have that remain, and I'll try to go through a little bit of it, but I don't know that I'll have a lot of answers to it. And number one is they'll have the ability to pay around $20 million to their athletes beginning in 2025. But the percentages, will it be based on Title IX, or will the athletics departments be able to determine who gets what? That's going to be, my guess is probably something that'll have to go to court again to figure it out, because the people I've talked to think that it's going to be Title IX applied, which means that if you have 52% of your athletes are female, that 52% of that money is going to go to female athletes. Whereas other people are like, the reason why they're collectives to begin with are football, men's basketball, and whatever niche sport is really important on campus, whether it's wrestling at Iowa or hockey in Minnesota or maybe baseball in another place. That's going to be a tug of war, and it's going to really determine whether or not collectives remain. Because if the athletic department can determine, hey, football and men's basketball are driving forces. This is why we've got this all here, and they get 90% of that money, and everybody else kind of splits the rest evenly. Then I don't know that you're going to need much, if any, involvement from a collective. But if they got to spread it all evenly, and the women's track athlete, field hockey player, or the male shot putter, or whatever, get the same as everybody or pretty close to it, then the collectives are going to be there, because everybody wants to get that quarterback, power forward, pass rusher, and that's going to be the difference maker in whether or not you win games, go to bowl games, win important games, maybe even go to the playoffs.
I just want to step back here for a moment. This House case, House versus the NCAA, Scott. What is at the core of what brought this case and why it is the case? I mean, we've seen Alston, we've seen some of these other cases come through, but why is this case the game changer?
It's because this lawsuit was brought by Grant House, who I think was a swimmer at Arizona State. And it's how the cartel that is the NCAA and its member institutions prevented people from making money off their name, image, and likeness after the Supreme Court ruled that it was you were allowed to do it. So any athlete, based on the going back to 2016, will have the opportunity to reclaim some of this, and it's $2.7 billion. And as we know, that the NCAA will take care of about $1.1 billion, and then the rest will come from the institutions through reduced money from the Big Ten or from the men's basketball tournament and that sort of thing. So that opened that up. But I think the payment, where for years they were amateur athletes, and where 3 years ago, not Alston allowed them to pay for academics, and it opened up NIL. This allows them to actually pay the athletes. I think that's what really determines it. And, now it's 22% of the average power conference schools revenue. And why they came up with that percentage is because they do count scholarships, because they are significant. They count training monies. They count food, and the Alston money and everything else that they already get, which is right around, I would say, 25 to 30% of an athletics department budget comes from those areas anyway. And this provides it to where it's more of a 50-50 split on a comparable level to what you see in the NFL, what they get from these, from their collective bargaining.
Scott, you're out in California for a couple of days. What vibe are you getting from people? Now, obviously, it hadn't fully formed, but I think we saw the writing on the wall during the time you were out there. What vibe are you getting from people about? There's a lot of questions, but what was kind of some of the responses?
I think most of them are really hopeful, and I'll start with Josh Whitman, who I do believe is if not the best athletic director in the country, he's in the top handful. I think he's the best in the Big Ten. Been thoroughly impressed with him throughout this, and the way he articulates the message, the way he presents himself. I would almost be afraid if I'm a Illini fan that, man, that guy could be a commissioner someday. That guy could lead somebody. But what he had to say is this could be the most transformational moment in the history of the sport, because not only do they take care of the present, but it's the future, and it sets it on a course to where you could put it on a competitive plane to where it's not about who has the most money in war chest in NIL, that everybody can kind of, not a salary cap per se, but you can kind of decide and direct it without having it be, Ole Miss has this, huge, or the oil barons in Texas, or somebody died in Iowa and had a big farm and gave $100 million to the Hawkeyes or whatever. That you do have, kind of come from a balanced era, and I thought that was really, he articulated much better than I did on this. But I think that's kind of the hope. I talked to some coaches who they wanted clarity. It wasn't completely there, but they felt like it was on the right track, and they're all behind Tony Petitti. And that wasn't the case. Certainly wasn't the case under Kevin Warren, but even Delaney once in a while, they kind of, I don't know about this, but they were all behind Tony Petitti. They all believed that he was going to help the Big Ten. And so there are some questions, and talking to Brett a lot about the walk-ons, because I think that's an issue for developmental programs. The one you cover, the one I primarily cover, Wisconsin, Nebraska. In this part of the world, you've got to be a developmental program, because there's a lot of 3-star guys, and how you develop them determines whether you go 9-4, go to a bowl game, or you're 5-7, you're stuck home. And I think to fully fund those, now they have scholarship limits, and then they have roster limits. Well, it eliminates the scholarship limits. So if you still have 105, you can provide 105 scholarships. Will teams do that? Will they be able to do that? Will they be able to afford it? And then if they do, then what are they going to have to do to make sure it's Title IX compliant? Is that cut a sport on the men's side? Is it, add a sport on the women's side, or fully fund other sports? I mean, it's going to be really intriguing. And every sport, and the other part is every school has its niche sport that you can, I think, I don't know, Illinois baseball is really good. Golf is really good. Do you want to, all right, we're going to boost this up a little bit scholarship wise. Iowa wrestling, they have 9.9 scholarships. Do they want to say, you know what, we're going to take this up to 15, or we're going to, do whatever we can to ensure that we're beating Penn State instead of losing to Penn State, and I think there's going to be a lot of schools like that too. So those are the questions that remain to be answered, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a lot of clarity within the next couple of months.
First of all, what gives you that confidence that clarity could be sooner than later than just, it's different, but it's up to 20 million. I'm struggling to see any Power 2 or Power 4 conference going below that, right? Like they're all going to push it to the capacity and find the money wherever they can.
Yeah, it's fascinating. First, on the confidence, I think it's because they all seem to be coming from, except for Izzo was a little bit, but he's that way about everything. So, but and he's a guy that I think he's going to be short in his tenure anymore. But I think that they all seem to be projecting that confidence themselves. Like I'm hearing the things I want to hear, that there's kind of like the end of the road is upon us, that we're going to finally know what this means, and whether it's taking the collectives in-house and eliminating even what one person told me is like BS collectives. Like, hey, we're going to bring this guy in for $100,000, and then he comes over here and he signs 3 basketballs, and then here's your $100,000. It gets rid of that, and then in house they can kind of figure it out from there. And now the question is going to be, and ultimately probably adjudicated at the Supreme Court level, is, is it going to have to come based on Title IX revenue or money to be paying for these athletes, or is it going to have to come from, or can the athletic department completely determine who gets what? And because if it's the athletics department, I would say at Illinois and Iowa and almost every Big Ten school, it's going to be 90% plus will go to football and men's basketball, and the rest will just kind of go where it goes. If it's split 50-50 or roughly thereabouts, then, how does that work? And I think that's what keeps collectives going, because if you've got $10 million to spend on women's athletes and $10 million for men, and you can decide even from there, well, that out of that 10 million, 9.8 are going to go to football and men's basketball, and you still need to go out and get that pass rusher, that quarterback, and do everything you need so, and then that means you're going to need your collective there and doing what you've been doing the last few years, and then the bagmen from the past. So I think this is that's kind of fascinating. And then, by the end of the summer, I think there's just a lot of smart people with this, and they got 30 to 45 days before it'll be like approved by Judge Claudia Wilken. It sounds like they're heading down that path. I don't know that anything congressional or legislative can be accomplished in the next 6+ months because of the election and the polarizing part of our country in that regard. But I think maybe next year, if things slow down, if we're still here in January and February, that, maybe they can take some steps. Maybe there's some antitrust exemptions that can be put into place. Maybe, they've shown the path to making change to where, and that's where legislators and congressional people, senators, and then ultimately judges can be involved and say, my constituents are really pressing. And as far as your question about 20 million, I don't know that it'll happen right away, but I think it'll happen very quickly. And I know some ADs are like, we don't have that kind of money sitting around right now. They'll find it. They'll try to find it. They'll use it to raise money. And then, then they're going to have to replace something. And it could be salaries, not necessarily get dropped, but instead of paying the strength coach, $800,000, you're paying them $400,000, and said it, hey, I hope all of your facilities are up to date, because we're not starting anything on that unless some donor comes in and says, I want this, here's $20 million. So, and even then you'll say, well, you really need to spend 20, why don't you give it to this? So, I think they'll get there because they don't want to fall behind competitively. And then, as we know, if Brett only gets to spend $5 million on football and Iowa gets to spend 15, and same thing with Wisconsin, either Brett will be gone or he'll tell everybody about it, and probably both, So
yes,
anyway.
I was going to ask you, like, this money's got to come from somewhere, right? Like, they got to move this money around, and you kind of mentioned it. Like, I think the Big Ten and SEC, as you said, will get there. What do you think this means for, I guess, even some Big Ten SEC programs have been struggling to keep up, and then the rest of the Power Four, and then the rest of college athletics now that this is happening, because this is expensive for a lot of programs.
Yeah, and this is part that Josh kind of mentioned, and I think that everybody agrees to. And then it comes down to you. How do you handle it? And you have the smart people in charge. Do they understand what to do and how they allocate this money, how they raise it, how they move it around? And part of it with the Big Ten, like each of the schools got about $60 million from the Big Ten in fiscal 23. This year it'll probably be up by $3 to $4 or $5 million, somewhere around in there for the current fiscal year. But the upcoming one with USC, with Washington, with new CBS money, there's going to be a real jump to where it's going to probably be in the $70 to $75 million range from the Big Ten. That's where you can figure it out, because that's a big jump in money. Don't spend it on, well, we need to boost our internet team. We need to get 3 more people taking photos at football games. I mean, you say we're going to pay it for the players because the players are what matters. Because then when you invest in it, as we've all seen it, if you invest in football or men's basketball and they win, then people will come, and then people will be excited to give, because it's like, man, we got to the Sweet 16 this year, or we got to the Elite Eight, or we got to the Big Ten championship game, but we were only one player away. Well, here's how you get that one player, and things like that happen. But if you suck, people will ignore you really quickly, and I think that's the problem. So I think out of the teams that underperformed, I don't think Illinois, they've struggled as far as financials when it comes to ticket sales for men's or football, I should say, not men's basketball. Iowa, it's the other way around. But I think if they can boost that, if they can have a winning season again, if they can show progress and fans start to come and respond, and then they say, hey, we're on our way, be part of this team, help us grow. That's what really progresses it. There's a couple of schools that I worry about keeping up. I think UCLA, Maryland, and Rutgers are the three that really struggle financially. And UCLA now has its calimony payments, where it has to pay California $10 million a year, and it doesn't even have it. They're the ones that I think could really fall down. And then when you start to look at like Big 12, the differences that they have, like in state here between Iowa and Iowa State, there's always been a major disparity. But going forward, even out of like the playoff, how much money these teams get in the playoff, and it's got a chance where they may not hit $6 million versus 20 for Iowa, and that'll be the swing some differences, in in-state recruiting. And then ultimately, does somebody like a Matt Campbell decide, you know what, I just can't compete for a championship. I can compete for my league title, but not a national title. So that's the trickle down, I think, for the other leagues.
I'm almost the most thing I'm intrigued about moving forward is kind of the Title IX aspect of this, Scott, and the ramifications of that. Is it they get the revenue from what their sports generate, or what is it 50-50 here? But the other thing is the NIL aspect of this. The hope is that they can kind of bring it in-house. Color me skeptical of all of this, Scott, given that, if you're at Alabama or you're at Michigan or whatever, Ohio State, you could get more of that. The key comes down to enforcement, right? So what do you find is going to be the path forward with enforcing that NIL is not pay for play, what has obviously become?
I don't know. That one's so far beyond me. I really don't, because the NCAA itself has been largely toothless in this area, or they've been neutered if they aren't toothless, that they go to court and they lose, or we've seen that even recently with some of the judgments against them by like Tennessee and Virginia and what have you. So I think that will always be there, that element. And, but what this largely does is it removes that, I don't know how the collectives work in Illinois as much, but like the one in Iowa has like two prongs. It has like the socialist prong, which is, hey, you go volunteer and read at this elementary school, this kids center, you get X amount of money. And then you have the capitalist one, which is, hey, Cade McNamara, here's your check from, that's sort of, I'm sure the same thing with Illinois. And it'll remove the first one. It'll just say, you know what, you're getting paid, and or they'll sign up and then you get paid extra for going and volunteering and doing things like that. And then the other one will have to remain, right? I mean, otherwise, how do you differentiate yourself? You're not going to be, then it's about prestige and program, but it's a capitalist world right now. So if Illinois and Iowa are competing for a power forward in Chicago, and Illinois decides, hey, we want to pay you $75,000 in a blazer. And I'm just kidding.
Very specific, Scott. It feels like historical context.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry about that. No, I'm just kidding. I just thought I'd make it a little bit funny here. But if there was that difference, and now there's no problem. There would be no tape. Nobody would send a tape in, and oh, by the way, that coach is still coaching too.
Yeah, get paid a lot of money to do it too.
Yeah, right. He's had his own issues over the years. But then that ability is there for Illinois or Iowa. Maybe Iowa wants to do the same thing, and so you can do that. And I think that's probably the path that'll happen. So 85 to 90% of the athletes will be fine out of this. There won't be any issues. The especially the non-revenue sports, they should be thrilled because they're just along for the ride. And most of probably the younger 3-star guys that everybody kind of recruits, they should be fine too. It's like, hey, you get an extra $15,000-$20,000 just by going to school here and standing great, having your grades. But then the difference makers, the ones that get you to the Sweet 16, the ones that get you to the high level football games, those are the ones you're probably going to have to use the collective for. And I still think that they'll be around. And Lord knows we know in the SEC that'll be the case.
Well, we've heard the term market value. Like they're going to try to get that under control, I guess, if they bring it in-house where it's not so pay for play. I mean, good luck with that, right? Because the market value is whatever Bill in Burlington wants to pay for a quarterback. So I don't like, that's what I don't know how that's going to look, because you can determine the market value just by your interest.
The only way you can do that is to not have the Title IX part of it attached. Then you could say, everybody's got $20 million to spend. And if I want to spend $18 million on Cade McNamara, then I can. Or whatever player you want, or whatever shooting guard you want. If it's a blank slate of $20 million, then I think the marketability is there. Then I think it's a really good plan. But Title IX is a factor. It's a federal law, and most schools lose when they try to attack it. So I think now, what happens going forward, I think it's, a school or two is going to try to challenge that. And then it's going to go ultimately to the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to determine is this just about opportunity, which means that they have the opportunity to have a scholarship, to get paid evenly, or is it about, hey, we need to make every single dollar fair, like half of it goes to the women, half of it goes to the men, the way the scholarships are proportioned. That's going to be the ultimate determination in it, because then you're right. Then it's marketability, and then you don't necessarily need the side stuff as much. That will still be there, but it won't be as big of a factor ultimately. And it'll be kind of what Title IX was meant for in the beginning, which is, hey, this kid is, Caitlin Clark is a marketable superstar. Let's let her go to Nike and do all this other stuff, rather than, hey, we need this person to be the number 2, but here's $200,000. Go sign a couple of autographs and we're good.
I want to get you out of here on this, Scott, because I'm glad you mentioned something about Josh Whitman, because Jeremy and I have always thought, like, okay, he's good, but you're wondering, like, if you're too close to it, like, are you not, are you too far in that zone? So to hear you say that backs up what we had thought. So what makes him, Scott, as appealing as a voice? Like, I feel like his voice, he's getting more comfortable with it. He's using it more. So what makes him so appealing for maybe to keep climbing that ladder?
There's just so much about him, his efficacy, I guess. He presents himself really well. He doesn't try to BS you. He doesn't try to sugarcoat anything. He tells it like it is, but he does it in a palatable way that makes you feel like it's well thought out and articulate. And it's just, and I've been around ADs who you just kind of, I don't know, like they're almost like car dealers, and a bad one at that. This one is, he walks into the room, everybody knows he's there. When he talks, everybody is quiet and they listen to him. He says things that are right, where he comes from almost every angle. He seems to understand the issue, and he can present it in a way that I think really resonates. It could be something about travel for Olympic sports athletes and how we need to make sure we do this because this is important. Like, he's got a grasp of the issue, and the way he articulates it and presents it, I think, is a way that very few athletic directors can do that. And at the Big Ten level now, I would say the new one at Iowa, Beth Getz, I think they are really well thought of because they understand, they have a grasp of the issue. They're progressive enough within this industry to know where this is leading, and we need to be at the forefront of it, not just trying to hold it back because of, or even worse, not understanding it. And the other part is they fight for their own institutions, but and in Josh's case certainly does, but also understands the big picture, understands the ramifications that, it's no good if just Illinois wins. It's good if Illinois can win and everything's competitive, then it means more and everybody benefits. And the Big Ten's always been that way, for 128 years or whatever it's been. So that's what I really like about him. I think, I always kind of said if there was a football only governance structure, if it comes out of the NCAA, if it's FBS football or something like that, he'd be the perfect president, commissioner, chairman. And maybe that is in his future. Once Tony Petitti in 10 years or whatever retires, I could see him taking that role too, because he's certainly an industry leader. And now I'm glad that he's on the Division I council, because I think he can really impact and make change in a way, kind of like Bob Bowlesby did when he was Iowa's AD and then ultimately became the Big 12 commissioner. And in some ways, Josh is even a little bit better than Bob is in certain areas.
Seconded on all of that, Scott. Scott Dochterman, The Athletic, kept you longer than we thought, but it's such an intense and intricate issue that is happening because it's college athletics future. But you're doing a great job covering it. We really respect all the work you do. So appreciate the time and insight, man. Yeah,
same to you guys. Love being part of this, and can't wait to see you guys in Indy. 2 months away, which will we'll snap our fingers and we'll be right there because we know the summer goes too fast these days. So
absolutely. Thank you, Scott.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, great stuff from Scott Dochterman. Thank you for setting that up, Joey. He's one of the best national reporters, so really appreciate his insight on this because we wanted to do this podcast, Joey, because this is the future of college athletics. Like we can get so caught up, as Scott said, in this recruitment. We'll do a basketball podcast here shortly with Derek about how's Illinois going to wrap up this roster, like roster building, roster retention. It's all going to change here in about a year when this House settlement and its ramifications all take course. So this is a monumental change. It's just a reformation of everything we know about college athletics.
Yeah, first off, thanks for Scott, who has really been covering the heck out of this. Someone that I know that I look across over to Iowa and see the work he does, and he's at the top. So really appreciate him coming on and shedding some light and kind of presenting things that we had thought and helped us maybe understand a little bit more. But yeah, this is, you knew it was coming. Like this, it kind of feels like there's so many questions still. There are so many questions that are going to be answered over the course of the next year, as Scott indicated, maybe a little bit before that. But it does feel a little bit like some finality because it's just been these incremental moves for the last 3 years. We're going to the Austin, the NIL, and you just kind of felt like you were crawling there, and it needed something needed to happen to get you across that finish line. Like this is where you might be able to step back and take a breath. Like, okay, we've reached this very, very far point. I don't know how much further we push past this. And now this settlement feels like that point. It feels like we're going to know all the answers in a year, and it won't be this kind of cloud hanging over for what's the next domino to fall. And within that, it changes everything. It changes literally everything. There are still so many questions, but it's a foundational shift in college athletics.
Yeah, Josh Whitman wrote a public letter, and again, this is just why he's good at what he does, and we'll talk about that. Is he's communicating with the fan base, not just the big donors, not just people in the industry. He's saying like what this means and what it'll mean for his program. And he said in his opening graph here, by all accounts, this settlement will precipitate the most comprehensive reform in the history of college athletics. And that's not hyperbole. This will change everything about college athletics moving forward. And I think it's important that Illinois, as they have, I think in this time of change, be ready for it. And that's where I think Josh Whitman is so key in all of this. And in his letter, Joey, he said, all athletic programs, including those in the Big Ten, face very real financial constraints. On our campus, we must determine what we can afford, who will receive these new scholarship or revenue sharing benefits, and in what amounts. The analysis will inevitably lead to an important discussion with others at the university regarding institutional expectations for competitive excellence and how those expectations intersect with student-athlete opportunity, experience, and equity. That is a loaded sentence to me. He's basically saying, like, all right, we are now in a time where we have to decide what is important, how important is this to us, and what are we willing to financially do. This is going to this is very expensive. All of this is very expensive. And this $20+ million, whatever it is, has to come from somewhere. Is that from cutting a program? Is that coming from cutting staff within the DIA? Is that coming from raising more money? Is that coming from, hey, facilities? We're not going to worry about those for a decade or two because we got to figure out how to do all this. So I just think those are going to be the fascinating conversations that I'm looking forward to talking to Whitman about at his June media roundtable. Is what are the immediate ramifications of this, and what are the options that are now on the table? Because if you want to compete in football and basketball, does it cost other sports? Does it come at the expense? Like, if you want to compete more in baseball than you do in, say, men's track, does baseball get more scholarships with no scholarship limit than a men's track program? Like, those are the kind of conversations that are going to happen moving forward.
Yeah, and baked within that, within his statement, feels to me like saying, and if we deem you as someone as a program, we're going to very heavily financially invest in, you better win.
Yeah.
Like, which is there now. Obviously, you're not hiring people for the sake of just existing. You want to win. That's what this is all about. But if you're going to get, X percentage of this $20 million, you're not getting this to just be a run-of-the-mill outfit. Like, you're going. Otherwise, we can reallocate that, or we can replace you, which is, that's just the reality of it. It's existed, but now there's a financial number on top of that. So, yeah, I had another point I wanted to make. The facilities is interesting. We can get into with Josh when we talk about Josh later. He checked a lot of those boxes. There's more to do, obviously, but I think if you look back now at
getting that done now is probably a good idea, or getting it
that's
done.
right, because now you're not having to worry about the football team in the back of the end zone in a crappy facility. They've got this beautiful oven, or baseball, softball, golf. Like, that looks pretty good in hindsight.
Well, listen, and Penn State's going to do a $700 million renovation of Beaver Stadium, which is very necessary. Like, the atmosphere there is insane with how many people they fit in that place. But it just looks like a giant erector set to me. It doesn't look like what a program like Penn State should have. They need that, but now they need that at the same time that they need to invest this other money elsewhere. Of course, when you have 100,000 people at a football stadium, it's a lot easier to do those things than it is when you have 30,000 or 40,000 like Illinois is having. So that's the other part of this. Like, if you want to be able to pay that $20 million in revenue, you got to get people in the stands at football games. That's going to be really important for Josh Whitman, Brett Bielema, and Illinois football moving forward. But I just feel like I mentioned it before with Scott, but the Title IX part of this is going to be really interesting.
That's the biggest question right now, right?
Yeah, and it's going to probably play out in the courts because the NCAA could get sued, and I think Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated has done a really good job of covering this as well. The NCAA could get sued by women for not having the equal revenue share, right? But then you could be sued by a football player for not getting the equal share that they bring in, because what football brings in 80, 90% of all the revenue for an athletics department, prop up all these other programs. Shouldn't they be getting 80% of that? So where do they find the equilibrium there? Or what is it? Because from what we understand, Title IX is equal opportunity, right? And that's scholarships. That's all these things. Is it equal revenue share? I don't know. So I think that's going to have huge ramifications, because if you can pay 18 of that 20 million to the sports that bring in that, which is basketball and football, then I think this NIL problem can be solved a lot by having it internally. But if not, if you're paying 10 million and 10 million to women and 10 million to men, man, football and basketball, you're still going to have that huge NIL pay for play market, unless you have some great enforcement. And I'm just still skeptical of whether the NCAA or whoever's running all this, Joey, is capable of enforcing this, because it's just, they don't have the manpower. They don't have the resources to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting because when NIL came out, and then, there's been so many questions over the last few years, and the statement's always been, well, the toothpaste is out of the tube at this point. Like, good luck. And now it feels like they say, well, maybe we can get a little bit back in there if we need to fix this. Now, I am skeptical about that, because in the process of NIL happening and now, and maybe trying to bring it in-house, as Scott talked about, or work from there, everything around NIL has just ballooned, right? Like, you've got these huge collectives, and it's like, why would they stop? If there's an appetite to pay, why? Like, you're not.
We're finding out
that is so interesting.
We're finding out what the true market is for players, and it's bigger than I think we expected. Given that, like, there is no salary cap, that there is no, like, the market for these players is really high. Now, does that have a bubble because everyone's shooting their shot, and maybe I haven't been burned enough by some of these guys not working out or leaving after a semester or whatever it is? But yeah, it's just like that market has ballooned more than I think any of us thought it would.
I also want to ask, and this is what I meant to ask earlier, and I'd forgotten, not imminently, but over the course of 10, 15, 20 years, as you start to see new coaches cycle in and out, are those salaries different? Like, how different do those salaries, like, you're not going to go to, I don't know, name a top tier coach, right? You're not going to go to Ryan Day and be like, hey, buddy, listen, tough stuff here, but you're going to have to give about $4 million of that back. You got this $20 million deal. Like, that's not going to happen. But
Warren Tate
salaries.
Warren Tate asked me on the radio the other day. Sorry to interrupt, but like, I'm just on that point. He asked, like, where's this money coming from? You got to get it from somewhere. So that's either the programs or it's your salaries elsewhere. Because why are coaches getting paid so much? Why are these administrators getting paid so much? Because you don't have to pay the players. In the NBA, the players are paid more than the coaches, right? Like, and that happens. Like, I don't know if we get to that level in college because the coaches have such a big impact on everything. But like, what's Bill Belichick? He made 15 to 20 million. Like, that's less than his quarterback.
So I do think the market's going to, like, there's going to be a really top tier coach hired somewhere in the next 6 years, and his contract figures are going to come out, and people are going to be like, wow, what a terrible agent, this guy. But I think you'll see that, like, start to change where those numbers start to fall because you need to put it in your 20 million pot. And as we talked about with Scott, it might take a minute to hit that threshold, but when one school finds out another school's at 20, they go. And then it's a domino effect. That 20 is not going to take long to get to. And if you're in the Power Four and you're not at that 20, people are going to raise hell inside your athletic department because you're behind. And like, you just can't not be there. You have got to be there. And that means you've got to find that money by whatever means you can.
And he said, like, if you're Illinois and you have a football coach that you think can win, and that football coach isn't getting the same resources as competitors, like you're not getting, he's going to look to leave. Now you have contracts and you have buyouts and all those different things, but it'll be fascinating to watch. So I'm fascinated by what happens there, and get ready. I'm wondering, Joey, does this help Illinois in the long term? Like, does this being in the Big Ten certainly is helpful, but I also think with the athletic director you have, I think he's shown that he's gotten out in front of stuff like this, like NIL, to where this could be an avenue for Illinois to improve, but you also need to spend well. And that's what's the fascinating part of this is, I know it's not certainly a salary cap, but the people who spend their money better now, like, who's the Tampa Rays of college athletics? Texas A&M has spent all this money, but they've kind of been the New York Mets. I think how you spend that money is going to be really, really important moving forward.
Yeah, I think if we look at football in terms of Illinois, I believe this is a good coaching staff. I believe this is a coaching staff that can identify talent, that can develop talent. I understand what the record has been the first 3 years, but I do believe this is a good coaching staff. And I believe Josh Whitman believes that because he continuously gives them resources to make it a good coaching staff. If you believe in that and you can find a way to level the playing field around you, that would seem like it would be good for Illinois. What does good look like? I don't know. I mean, right, in the Big Ten, what it is good. Good to me is bowl games every year. So if that's what it is, then like, this is good for Illinois big picture, because I believe they've got the people in place to make it good, starting with Josh Whitman, starting with Brett Bielema. I think for basketball,
it's great.
It's great, but I don't know how much changes, right? Like, basketball's humming along anyway. None of this would feel like it would handcuff what they've been able to do to this point. So for those two programs, I think you're probably in pretty good shape in terms of what you feel big picture long term, because like football, basketball also has really good coaches in place.
Yeah. My questions would be, if you're those sports, I think it really is helpful. And I would include women's basketball into that. I think baseball could benefit from this of not having a scholarship limit. Like, is that limited Dan Hartleb to where it's just like you're kind of good in the Big Ten? Can you be great? Do you invest
3 more scholarships? Go get more arms.
Yes.
Right? Go get 3 pitchers. Have fun, buddy.
Does that make a difference? But then there's, who does it cost? And, I sit there and think of men's gymnastics just because that whole sport has felt like it's on the chopping block. As great as that program has been in Illinois, the last national title was men's gymnastics. Paul Ruggieri's has done a great job here the last couple of years, or Daniel Ribeiro. Sorry, I said Paul Ruggieri. Daniel Ribeiro has done a great job the last couple of years of getting that program back to the start, to the top of the sport. So, like, but is that in danger? Like, do they want to use those scholarships elsewhere? Or do they need those scholarships for Title IX reasons? Because does football Does it go to a 95 scholarship limit where there's no walk-on program? That'll be fascinating. Like Brett Bielema, a former walk-on himself, has really prided himself on the walk-on program. They found some good players there. Iowa has done a great job there. That'll be fascinating as well, but it'll probably come at some cost to some program.
It will. I do want to bring up the walk-on because I'm glad Scott mentioned that, and he talked to Brett Bielema, as he mentioned out in California. Like, that's Brett Bielema's story, right? He was a walk-on who everything since the second he walked onto the campus at Iowa has kind of been a trickle down from getting a shot there. And you can find good walk-on players. Hello, Tip Ryman in Arizona. Like, that's college athletics. And it would stink. This is a little off topic, and I apologize, but it would stink to see these great stories, these Tip Rymans, your Miles Scotts, your Alex Pilstroms. I'm just like in the recent 3 years.
Well, I saw somebody
be a casualty of big business.
I saw somebody suggest there could be a practice squad, which would be walk-on. Like, I think that was in, Dellinger's piece so I think they still got so much to figure out here. Like, the settlement won't be actually agreed to until later this summer, most likely, but there's still a lot to figure out here with all of that. And that's why people like Whitman are so important in this discussion.
That's why I said it feels like the end is in sight, and I do believe that, but there are going to be a lot of developments over the course of the next 12 months. But then I think at the end of that 12 months, you can breathe and think, hey, maybe I've got a grasp of what this thing is, but boy, is it going to be a road to get there.
Yeah. So I don't know if we answered everything. Hopefully we explained what is happening really well with Scott. But it's just going to have huge ramifications. And before we get out of here, Joey, and wrap this thing up, you and I were talking, like, I objectively, like, sometimes I feel like I can sound like a fanboy when talking about Josh Whitman, but that's just because I've been around athletic directors, right? Very different guys. Now, Whitman's mentor was Ron Gunther, but Ron Gunther wasn't that public. Like, he didn't speak to the fans the way that Whitman does. He wasn't available to the media all that often. Whitman gets out there and actually talks to the media a couple times a year. And then Mike Thomas spoke a lot, but just didn't have a lot to say, and just didn't connect with people the way Whitman does. I think he's one of the best athletic directors in the country. And I've thought the last couple of years, what we've seen locally, he's starting to emote and kind of voice nationally. Like, he's been willing to kind of push and prod and say, this is where we need to go, fellow college leaders. Last year saying we need to flex our leadership muscles. He is doing that now. So to hear from Scott Dochterman that he feels similarly about Whitman, I think that's a great thing for Illinois. Of course, you do worry, does he leave eventually? Probably will, because whether he's the football czar, the Big Ten commissioner, or NCAA president, I think he has aspirations, and he talked about that with me in his office last month. But I think he's going to be here for a little bit longer, and I think that's really important for Illinois to have that guy in charge of their program and running and leading their program for what I think will be a decent time now, because Petiti just got there. Charlie Baker just got there. Now, if they have a football czar or something, maybe he goes up for that role in a couple of years if they do something like that in college football. But I think he's going to be here for a while, and I think he's still got a lot more he wants to accomplish, particularly with football.
Yeah, I do think someone's listening to this saying, oh, God, what school is going to poach Josh Whitman? I don't worry too much about that. I don't
think he'd be an AD anywhere else. Like, he probably
– I agree.
That USC job was open. I mean, they probably could have talked to him, but I don't think he would have taken that one. I don't think that, just my read of it,
Me too.
It would be something national. It'd be something bigger.
Me too. It feels like if he's going to be an athletic director, it's going to be at Illinois.
Yes.
Like that's my gut feeling on it. I don't want to speak for Josh, but that's the feeling I got. I know how it kind of also like feels like Coleman Hawkins. Like, I'm not going to play anywhere in the Big Ten. Like, if you're worried about ex Big Ten school coming in, I just don't worry about that with him. And to the point of finding his voice, I don't want to make the guy sound like the little engine that could, but he's been around for a while, and we've talked to him. And when you talk to him, like, man, this guy's saying stuff. Like, he's got ideas. But he was also a new Big Ten athletic director in what was really a very established room up until recently with all the turnover. So those of us who talked to him locally, and even national people who talked to him, probably like heard it. They knew, like, this guy's got a plan. It's sound. He explains himself very well, but I don't feel like that was as broadcast as much. And then some turnover happens in the Big Ten, and Josh is now one of I think it was the fourth longest tenured athletic director in the conference. And now you can feel it. Now you can feel his voice. So like he's comfortable. Maybe not that he wasn't comfortable, but you're seeing that comfort come out more and more. And you open an ESPN article, and now granted he's the chair, but like Josh Whitman's quoted. And I think if you read that, if people consume that, it's like, damn, this he's been on this for a while. And I think people are starting to figure it out. And like, I'm happy for the guy because he is good. And he's good to us. He articulates things very well. And you've seen this. Go back to a roundtable. Maybe that'll be something we can do over the next couple of weeks, Jeremy, is pull up the transcriptions from the roundtables in 2020. I guess that was a Zoom one, if I'm not mistaken, 21, and see how much Josh was saying then is starting to happen now. Because I would guess pretty confidently that a lot of overlap is there.
Yeah, like he's always had the voice. Like his he always had that talent and that leadership ability. But it's like anybody that's kind of working their way into a new position. It's like first if you're Caleb Williams, you know you're the starting quarterback, right? Like, but first you need to hear and like develop relationships with people and kind of feel it all out. And then you can start, hey, this is my idea. This is what I think. And then all of a sudden you keep doing that, and you build credibility and you build relationships, and all of a sudden you're the leader. And I think he certainly has done that nationally now. So I think Illinois is fortunate that they have him, and kudos to that committee that found him and decided to go with him over some other qualified candidates that were D1. I mean, Patrick Chun, I think the Washington AD was the other candidate that was really reported there. And they took a chance on the D3 alum. And this is why I feel like hiring coaches that are your alums usually don't work out, but maybe the ADs, if they're as good and as talented as Whitman, can really be good because you keep them around maybe longer than you should.
I want to follow up on the facility thing because I'm going to ask him at the roundtable next month. Like, dude, this was a fast and furious thing, right? It's like Smithson or Aubin, boom, 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 boom. And at some point, like, man, this is kind of costly for this. So I am wondering if he saw this coming, like, hey, this is our window. We've got, or if it was just a matter of happenstance. So it's like, these needed done immediately, and we took care of them immediately. Like, I do imagine there was a little bit of foresight, but I'd be fascinated to hear what he says because, again, that looks really good on May 24th of 2024, that those are all taken care of. Or at least a lot of them. Let's say 90% of them are taken care of.
Any final thoughts, Joey, as the world of college athletics is changing before our eyes?
I'm just glad Scott was here because I was like reading up this morning. I'm like, all right, I do sound like kind of a fool most times on here. Like, I don't want to sound this much like a fool. And he explained it really, really well. And like his ability to tie so Illinois fans could feel like, oh, sure. Like, I get what you're saying. And also, you know, there are a lot of parallels between Illinois and Iowa in terms of how things operate. So his knowledge there really, really helped. But it's crazy. It is a very crazy thing. I'm looking forward to in a year, hopefully, that we're like, all right, I get it. But there are going to be like incremental developments that you're going to be like, wait, what now? Like when the scholarship thing actually happens, which we think it will, that is going to have a lot of like, oh my goodness, to it. And I get that. But then, you know, eventually you'll kind of learn. I did see an interesting piece I was reading through this morning, ESPN, and they were talking about the class of 2025, which would be included in the scholarship. Like, there are still questions about that as every school in the country goes into June. That is the biggest official visit month of the year. And you're wondering what that scholarship deal looks like when they get on campus. Like, that is I'll be curious to ask Brett Bielema. Hopefully, I think we'll talk to him next week. That is an underlying story that is a really, really big deal going into a really big month.
Yeah, all this change is scary, and I understand some people don't like it. But I think this kind of thing, and the reason the power conferences here are paying out $2.8 billion to do it is necessary for the survival of college athletics as we know it. It'll be changed though. And what that change looks like in actual practice and practicality will be phenomenal, or really interesting and intriguing to watch moving forward.
Yeah, there are also going to be a lot of Illinois athletes. Every D1 athlete is going to get some of this money over the course of time. So, like, that is so interesting to me that if you're Aaron Jordan, Io DeSumo, Reggie Corbin,
yep,
like Reggie Corbin was a big deal for Illinois on that bowl team, like what do these payouts come back looking at him over the course of the next 10 years as he starts getting these checks? So, I mean, it's kind of a little thing that probably won't talk about much.
Matisse, Boyd Bodine.
Congratulations, buddy. But that's interesting to me because, like, we have wondered how this money is going to be divided up between athletes. And if it's based on, like, there's been talk of what your market value was at the time. Reggie Corbin, I would assume, like, where they were at Illinois at that moment in time, they were really marketable. Joshi Matter-Bebe was really marketable at that time. So, again, it's not something that probably a lot of us will spend time digging in on over the course of the next however many months. But that's an interesting subplot to me. Like, it's kind of a nice gig to be just chilling at home and, like, you get a check because congratulations, you ran for, 6 straight games of 100 yards. So enjoy your money.
Yeah, I think it's paid out over 10 years from athletes from 2016 on. So it'll be interesting to see what those checks are actually like for those guys. All right. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Hopefully we learned something along the way and talking through all these changes are coming to college athletics. Thank you to Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Thank you to Joey Wagner. Thank you guys for listening on the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notifications bell. We appreciate you guys as always. We'll do a basketball pod with Derek Piper. But until then, everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.